Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story, Wendigo Encounter. Just to start off with some backstory. My group of friends had started making a nasty habit of joking about the Wendigo. My friend Stacy and me didn't for a while just due to the fact we believed in the supernatural, but after a few months it grew on us. And not knowing that the Wendigo can actually be triggered by such things, we joined in biggest mistake ever. I had just moved into the country, and we enjoyed making trips into town to have a few drinks, which is about a 30-minute walk from my place to town. At night, the first 10 minutes after leaving the bridge that leads out of town is pitch darkness with no streetlights. After that, street lights are very sparsely places which can cause for a very creepy walk back without anything happening. So with that all in place, let's continue. Stacy and I begin our night walking into town, get some beers, and have some fun. Shortly into the night, something slightly strange happens. We receive a phone call from her little sister at home, crying and scared because she saw someone sitting on my friend Stacy's bed. She calms her sister down and asks her cousin to check her room for her sister at home. Everything is fine. No one's in the room. Also, ghosts and weird things happening at her house were very common, so a sighting like this was strangely regular. We continue our night. Into the night, we meet a guy who seems pretty cool. He's riding a bike and tells us he's pretty drunk or something. We decide to hang with him for a bit, wanting to meet people in town. A ways into our hangout, we were sitting on a park bench, and the guy is laying on the ground in front of us. Suddenly, my friend stands up and says it's time for us to go. I shrug and agree, and we get going. After getting away from him, she tells me how the guy bit her ankle the day after she had teeth bruises on her ankle. Kind of flustered the guy would do that we continue our walk out of town. Finally, we pass the bridge, which is our last source of light for the next 10 minutes. We turn on our phone flashlights, and we turn on some music trying to ease the spooky feeling of being in pitch darkness in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, we hear a voice beside us. We both jump. It's the same guy on his bike. He asks us if he can follow us until we reach the fork in the road. We need to go left, and he needs to go right. Still slightly creeped out, but almost at the street lights and the fork in the road, we agree. Regardless, he had to go that way, and so did we. After a bit of walking, we finally reach the fork in the road and the first street light. We sigh with relief, hoping he would leave. But he turns down our way instead of going the way he needs to go. Now at this point, we are thoroughly creeped out. We try to ignore it and keep walking, holding our breaths, wanting to reach the next street light, which is some ways away. Finally, after what felt like forever, we reach the next street light, which is also for some reason a small graveyard. I hate my area. Once we reach the street light, the guy stops dead in his tracks and doesn't move any further past it. As we turn around, the guy looks like he has suddenly passed out on his bike, his head down and shoulders slumped. I was about to say something to him, but my friend stopped me and said we really needed to leave him. I agreed, not wanting to be around him much longer either. After a few seconds, I take a peek over my shoulder. He's gone, vanished. The worst part is even if he had turned around and started pedaling as fast as he could, we still would have been able to see him some ways down the road. I panicked, but also slightly relieved he wasn't there anymore. We continue walking, trying to pretend we aren't creeped out. Walking quickly from street light to street light. Finally, we reach my driveway. My driveway is a long road of darkness. We hadn't put any lights in yet to try and brighten it. We began to walk slowly, holding our breath. Some weird feeling of dread coming over me the closer and closer we got to my house and the further into the driveway we entered. I don't know what came over us, but the sudden feeling of you need to run, and you need to run fast, came over us at the same time. We took of bolting at the exact same time without having to say a word to each other. We got to my front door. I unlocked it quicker than I ever have before. We get inside. Just as I'm about to close the door, this hellish scream or growl, whatever the sound, has come out of nowhere. I could hear it getting close to the door and steps. I slammed the door closed and locked it and dropping to the ground in fear. We both sat there holding our breaths, scared to even breathe. Fast forward a couple weeks. Me and my Stacy had forgotten about what happened. Suddenly it came up in convo, and we tried to find the sound we heard. Nothing worked. We looked up every possible animal, even animals that weren't likely. We spent an hour on this, until we decided to look up the sound of a Wendigo. It was the only sound that fit perfectly. Second story. Boy in the woods. This happened to me when I was a teenager. I think it was the spring of 1998 when I was 14. My Boy Scout troop went hiking in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. I grew up in a very small town in Tennessee, and the boys in my troop were people I know my whole life, and we were all very close and knew each other very well and trusted each other. We'd been hiking for 5 days or so, and it was miserable. It rained every day, and we were all exhausted and sore and hungry and covered with blisters. The adults realized we'd bitten off more than we could chew in trying to hike a 60-mile trail, especially with the awful weather, so we'd changed course and gotten off the trail to spend the night in a drive-in campground. The kind of place with hookups for RVs and picnic tables and fire pit/grills and a central bathhouse with showers and toilets. It was in a very remote area far from a town or a house. There may have been a few other small groups there, but if there were, we never interacted with or saw any of them. We were all filthy and wet, and thus very excited about taking a hot shower. It was dark, and we'd finished dinner. A group of 5 of my friends, including my friend Jeremy, who, like everyone else in our group, I had known since we were babies, headed up to the bathhouse, which was maybe a quarter-mile walk through the pitch-dark woods up a worn-down gravel walking trail. I stayed behind to clean up, and after 10 or 15 minutes followed them by myself. I had a weak little flashlight, the old incandescent kind, pre-LED. I remember the woods were totally silent. When I got about halfway to the bathhouse, I could see the light from it off in the distance through the woods. I heard a noise to my left, and I looked over and saw my friend Jeremy standing by an old-school manual water pump about 20 feet off the trail. The kind of pump where you raise and lower a handle to pump water up from a well. There was a strange light around him, like the moon had come out from behind the clouds. I was startled to see him there by himself in the woods off the trail. I asked him if he was already done with his shower. He seemed kind of sad, and he said, "Yeah, it's all yours." I said okay, and didn't think much of it until I got to the bathhouse. When I walked in the door, my friends were all in there, and I heard Jeremy talking from in the shower. All the blood drained out of my head, and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had to sit down before I passed out. My friends were freaked out and wanted to know what was wrong. I told them what had happened. They nervously made jokes about how I must have been smoking pot. This was long before any of us had experimented with any mind-altering substances, but I could tell they believed me. Like I said, we'd known each other forever and knew when one of us was exaggerating or playing a joke. We all waited together until everyone was finished showering and brushing teeth and whatnot, and then walked back together in total silence. When we got to the spot I had seen, whoever, he was gone without a trace. The water pump was there, though. No one had noticed it before because it was a ways off the trail and obviously not in use. We got back to our campsite and went to bed freaked out. I remember not sleeping much that night. In all the years since then, I've never been able to figure out what happened. Was there a random teenage boy in the woods who looked just like my friend? Unlikely. Did I hallucinate it? Also unlikely. Who's to say? Third story. I believe I was stalked in the woods today. For context, I am 16M from the UK and am 6 feet 6 inches, so I have a scary figure to look at and don't deal well with strangers. I also have a very hard time expressing my emotions, and will usually walk in the woodland area down by my house to clear my head. It always works and is especially effective at times from 22.00 to 2.30, and I've never had any problems with these walks. Today I left the house a little after 22.00 and decided a quick walk before it got dark would be best. I got to the darkest area of the woods, yet it still looked light between the trees, so I continued on. I kept walking until I reached the metal bridge over a thin stream. Now at this point, I could keep walking my usual path, or go to my left and take a longer route that I am unfamiliar with. I would never have gone to look down this second option, but something made me want to go explore a slight bit into the area. It was still light after all. I ended up in that unknown area for around 5 minutes before deciding to head back, as it had suddenly got dark very quickly. I turned around with my phone's torch, lighting up an oath I was completely unfamiliar with, but I knew it was the only way out and decided to follow back. This path was strangely unfamiliar despite it being the same route I had taken into the area. I kept walking and realized I had no memory of entering this new section of the woods and became very panicked and distressed. However, I made it back to the metal bridge and crossed back to my usual path. I walked along my route and made it to my favorite spot at the bottom of a 200-foot quarry, which has become overgrown with summer vegetation, where I decided to rest my legs and read a book I had brought with me. I sat with my torch facing the book, reading quietly to myself, and hearing a faint raspy noise coming from the top of the quarry, almost as if someone were breathing through a gas mask. I closed my book, and the sound was now too prominent to ignore, and swiveled my torch onto the direction of the sound, and it took a gasp almost as if it were holding its breath. I pointed my torch back to my bag to zip it up and put my book away, and the sound became heavier. Once I'd finished putting my book away, I placed the torch in my lap so that the light was on my face and began to search the tree-line at the top of the quarry to see if I could spot anyone, but when I looked directly at the sound, it once again took a short gasp and stopped. I was so scared that I stood up, and the noise began to move away from me and round the top of the quarry, still rasping and now rocks crunching underneath some sort of weight. It was the first time in my life that I was frozen and began hyperventilating due to my fear. I stood still in the dark, listening to this thing that had stalked me for the past 5 minutes slowly move across the quarry's ridge and seeing rocks falling down to my level. I genuinely believe that someone wearing some sort of breathing device had been listening to me read my book and watched as I tried to find out where they were. I don't know what compelled me to go into the unknown area or why I decided to go to the quarry despite it being so late, but I am now certain of one thing. I am never into that quarry alone again, no matter how bad emotions become. Fourth story. The Wendingo. I am writing everything down in this journal to document our journey to Fort Kent and the subsequent events that transpired afterward. I hope that whoever finds this journal will publicize what had happened in this town to us between the dates of January 12th to February 13th, 2018. Do you know of the Fort Kent Wendingo in Alberta, Canada? Most would say it is an urban legend, but after what I have read and experienced, my view has taken a 180-degree turn. It all started when myself and a group of 3 friends wanted to make a Bollywood movie about the Wendingo. After spending 2 weeks of researching the Wendingo and what they looked like, I found the Wendingo of Fort Kent. Some say that a doctor locked himself in his house with his dead wife that had just died of smallpox. Then he ate her and turned into the Wendingo. along with his wife. Many of the town's folk died from smallpox. Once the man left his home, he killed and ate the remaining dozen or so residents of the town. No one is really sure about what happened, but there is one fact no one can deny. Fort Kent became a ghost town, and no one really knows why. After finding out all of this information, I knew that we had a great idea for a movie. The only problem was the place was pretty isolated. So if we got into any trouble, it would be days before anyone would be able to help them. Luckily, Bobby's parents were filthy rich, since they were both plastic surgeons. They spoiled Bobby rotten and gave him everything he wanted. Even so, he was a pretty down-to-earth guy and one of my best friends. Along with Bobby, there was Mike and Kylie. As for myself, the producer of the soon-to-be movie, my name is Tara. So we took off in a small jet, heading from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada to Elk Point Airport, Alberta. We took a fancy Canon 80D DSLR camera with us to shoot the movie, as well as a portable field mixer, a wireless microphone system, a shotgun microphone and boom pole, wind protection for the mics, a field recorder, and headphones. Along with all of that equipment, we brought camping equipment. When we got to Elk Point Airport, we rented a Hyundai Tucson, loaded it up with all of our equipment, and headed for Bonnyville. Now, it usually takes 45 minutes to an hour to drive to Bonnyville, but we were going in January. They had just gotten 24 cms of snow, and the roads were heavy with snow. It took us 3 hours to get to Bonnyville, where we got groceries and lots of alcohol for our month stay in the ghost town of Fort Kent. For a bit of background, the four of us have been friends since elementary and just graduated high school. We decided to take a year off before heading to college and came up with the bright idea of making a horror movie. Bobby's parents had given Bobby the sound equipment and camera as a graduation present. We spent the summer figuring out what we were going to film when we came across the urban legend of the Wendingo of Fort Kent. Since then, we have been obsessed about the film. After we had gotten the essentials needed for our trip to the ghost town, we headed for the fort. January 12th, 2018, Day 1. We arrived in Fort Kent around 2 p.m. It took us 4 hours to set up all the tents and gear. We decided to set up near the outskirts of town. For some reason, we felt more comfortable. Here, no one said anything, but everyone got more nervous the further we went into town. By the time we were all set up, the sun had already set, and we couldn't see anything past the glow of the bonfire. We decided to drink the night away, talking about all the things we would do once the morning came. Around 10 p.m., we started to notice snowflakes starting to fall. We huddled around the fire more, but when the wind started picking up as well, we decided to call it a night. We had 2 tents set up, one for me and Mike, and the other one for Kylie and Bobby. Mike and I lay on top of a blow-up queen-size mattress that had 3 heavy covers on top of it. The 2 of us got under the blankets and looked up at the ceiling. I could feel Mike trying to get into my pants, but I shrugged him off. This place was giving me a bad vibe, and I wasn't in the mood. The walls of the 8-person tent shook as the wind and snow pummeled against the tent, making it difficult to hear anything. At the time, I didn't think anything of it, but I swore I thought I could hear the howl of a wolf through the sound of the wind. January 13th, 2018, Day 2. I woke up around 6 a.m. this morning to Mike snoring beside me. His arm was draped around me as my eyes slowly opened. The tent was still, and the sound of the wind was silent. I brought my hand up to his arm and pulled it off of me. I rolled off the bed and pulled myself off of the floor. I quickly got dressed. To my surprise, it was warmer inside than I thought it would have been. I put on a parka and toque and opened the flap that led outside. A foot of snow fell into the tent the moment the flap was open. I let out a startled, silent meep and jumped back. I looked behind me, wondering if I had awoken Mike. To my relief, he was still snoring away. I composed myself and pulled myself out of the tent and into the snow. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked outside. I stood at 5'8" and had the snow reach up to my knees. So overnight we had gotten a fair amount of snow. So it took me by complete surprise when I saw a set of footprints traveling through the snow around our tents. I figured that Bobby must have gotten up during the night and had a smoke. So again, I didn't think much of it. I looked towards the town. 2 rundown houses stood about 100 feet away. Then I looked to my right and saw our rental vehicle completely covered in snow. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning off the vehicle of snow. By the time I had finally gotten it cleaned, the rest of my friends had gotten up and started walking around. Bobby had taken out his camera and started to film the area. The last I had seen him, he was heading into town with Kylie while Mike came over to me. We talked a while about the project we were working on. We didn't have any shovels, so getting the SUV out of the area we were in was very difficult. Eventually, after much effort, we got the SUV out and onto the soft snow. The 4-wheel drive made the situation a little better. We both got into the SUV and drove it through the town. We followed the footprints that seemed to go to each house in the town, until finally the footprints went to a house and there weren't any footprints coming back out. We parked the SUV on the side of the road, got out, and headed to the house the footprints went to. Turns out, the house had looked like someone had been living in it recently. We found them in the basement. Bobby was filming writing, which was covering every square inch of the basement. On one side of the wall, it read, "Beware the Wendigo." As the writing went along the wall, the writing got more and more messy. By the end, the writing became scratches in the wall. Finally, it read, "I am the Wendigo." We did some more shooting, making an introduction to the movie. By the time 4 p.m. came around, we decided to head back to the campground and pack it in for the night. By the time we got back to camp, it was pitch black outside. We parked the SUV beside the tents and all 4 of us headed inside mine and Mike's tent. We continued to drink and had a cold dinner from soup cans. We played cards until 10 p.m., right until we heard a howl coming right outside of our tent. We had been talking pretty loudly, so we hadn't heard it approach. We could hear the sound of crunching snow under heavy footprints. Then its shadow cast itself on the tent, and the only thing we could see were its legs. Not only was the creature bipedal, but it was huge. Mike was about to open the flap to check what it was when we heard the sound of metal being torn to pieces. The sound of the car alarm going off as it did. I wanted to scream, but I was too terrified to do so. Soon the sound of metal being torn to shreds stopped, and silence ensued. I was about to let out a sigh of relief when I heard another howl. Then the sound of the other tent being torn to shreds could be heard. After another 5 minutes, the sound faded and we could hear the creature walking away from our tents. We waited until midnight to get out of our tent and see the damage. The car and tent were destroyed. We had left most of our food in the car, and from what we could see, there was no food left. Kylie started to cry and Bobby tried to console her, while Mike and I just stood there in shock wondering what we would do next. Bobby had brought his camera into our tent, but the sound equipment he had been in his tent and was now destroyed as well. We realized that our project was finished and we would have to go back to Bonneville in the morning. We didn't get much sleep that night, and this was only the tip of the iceberg. Our stay in Fort Kent was only just starting. 5th story. There's a hatch in the middle of the woods. It was old, older than God, older than the 100-foot pines that towered above. It looked like a submarine hatch, sitting on a low concrete rise planted firmly in the forest floor. It wore a tight beard of pine needles over a rusted wheel handle with bolts the size of apples. It took both of us to get the handle to turn. Metal groaned in protest, screamed as it shaved away the layer of rust that had welded it shut. Together we pulled the lid open. It was heavy, heavier than a house. Then it split back on its hinge with a sigh of stale air. Darkness seemed to spill out of the hatchway, like it had been bottled up for eons and was now ready to infect the world. It looked as though a great metal mouth had opened up in the forest floor. A predator's mouth, starving and ready to feed. We peered down. A service ladder of rebar-like rungs descended the dark, concrete bore into the great unknown. Hazy, overcast sunlight fought the darkness and lost, penetrating a meager 5 feet before shadow claimed the hole for its own. Sammy found a rock that looked like a cat's head, negotiated it over the hatch, and dropped it down. It whistled off into darkness. We waited, 2 teenage girls in the woods of Washington, listening for a sound that never came, that rock hitting the bottom. I was spending a month of summer with my cousin Sammy at our grandma's place up in northern Washington. It was a gray, unsunny July. I'd only been there a day, but a kingdom of storm clouds had rolled in off the ocean and pitched camp over our corner of Washington, issuing unto it low, endless drizzle that left the world soggy and awful. Today, however, the clouds had parted, peeling back in a blast of sunlight, and leaving Sammy and I to our daily dose of mischief, 2 purloined cigarettes. With the smokes in hand, we cut out through the trees behind Grandma's house in search of someplace suitably grunge to light up. We followed a thin vein of hiking trail, eventually breaking off on our own through the wide, primordial riot of woods, not entirely claustrophobic, but dense enough that the massive pines would be warring for root space. We had been off the trail for no more than 10 minutes when Sammy called out to me, indicating the closed hatch that would eventually swallow us whole. We brushed away a thin skeleton of branches, a great bed of moss, a tangle of brush, to finally unearth the thing that resembled something city workers in bright orange vests might descend to access a gas main, which was odd because it bore no markings to denote its origin, not even warnings with penal codes to dissuade would-be vandals. It was anonymous and disconcerting, like its lack of designation meant it didn't belong, like it was an interloper. Sammy had asked me something. I looked up at her. "What? What is it?" She repeated, curious gaze pinned on the hatch. "I don't know," I told her. "I don't know what it is." I knew it was old. Older than God. Older than the 100-foot pines that towered above. The hatch was open and Sammy wanted to go down. "Come on, Laney," she groaned. "It'll be fun. We'll poke around, take some shots for our feeds." "I'm not on that shit," I shot back. "Social media is the death of rational thought." "True," she grumbled, "but what are we supposed to do? Hang out with Grandma all day and watch Rebel Without a Cause with commercials?" I took a long, pensive drag on the stale Winston, not wanting to admit that I was kind of terrified. Not only was I worried about the hatch lid slamming on us, trapping us in, but the thought of climbing down that shadowy ladder, of disappearing into the earth's dark, quiet belly, made me want to vomit. Luckily, I didn't have to make any excuses. It started to rain. "Shit," Sammy hissed as the first spray of drizzle fell in gray sheets. "Help me close it. Don't want it to flood." The rain was a fine mist, nothing more than a sneeze, and I doubted very much if it would flood, but I was more than happy to help her seal off that dark orifice. We did, together, before heading back through the trees, leaving the hatch behind. We were soaked through by the time we made it back to Grandma's. She fixed us plates of hot lasagna, and we all watched James Dean's effortless cool in Rebel. With the commercials, my grandma's house was not unimpressive. It was a 2-story Victorian rising in a collage of faded red and white from a wide lot of crabgrass, the open property hemmed by a wrought iron fence. all of it seemingly weighed down by 100 years of history. It looked like something out of a Tim Burton movie, a gothic manor surrounded by woods. A lone raft stranded in a sea of trees. I was staying in my dad's old digs, a mess of ancient band posters and records. Breezy punk stuff like the Gun Club and the Wipers. Despite all the vinyl, I was plugged into Spotify and Bowie was wailing Moonage Daydream when Sammy slipped in, face bright with mischief. "Come on," she said in an excited, breathy whisper. "Let's go." It was late, dark and late. I thought she had gone to bed. But she claimed a spot on the edge of my bed, charged with nervous energy. I lost my headphones and shifted to look at her, her eyes wide and excited. "What? Go." I screwed my face into a confused knot. The thing, the hole in the ground, the mention of the hatch, the mouth, made my skin crawl. "What?" I said. "No way. It's like midnight." "It's atmospheric," she countered. "It's pitch dark out. So? We'll vlog it or something. Record it. I don't know, it'll be fun." I groaned, shook my head. "No fucking way." "Then I'll go without you," Sammy huffed. "Into the hole? In the middle of the night?" "Yup. Totally alone. So if I get molested by subdwelling mutates, it's on you. Cost you the older cousin and all." "Don't be a bitch," I said, feeling my cheeks flare up. She smiled, a dimple forming beside her mouth, clearly amused at having manipulated me into a stalemate of mutually assured destruction. I was caught. Either I go with her and keep her in check, or I let her go alone and something might happen. She was 15, only a year younger than me, but impulsive and brash, and it wouldn't surprise me if she got hurt. I could claim ignorance, but if something happened, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Despite being just cousins, we had always been close, always been more like sisters than anything else. Sammy could drive me up the wall, but I still loved her, and I could see in her eyes that she wouldn't be swayed. I blew another long sigh, pushed myself off the bed, shrugged on my black windbreaker. "Let's get some fucking flashlights," I said. I prayed for rain I knew wouldn't come. The clouds had burned off in the moonlight, leaving the heavens bright and clear. We had found a set of headlamps in Grandma's junk drawer and navigated the low woods by the watery beams they provided. I had also taken an old Swiss Army knife. It was made of rust and looked like it had survived the Great War, but I took it just in case. I was hoping I wouldn't need it, hoping we wouldn't find the hatch, hoping it would be lost in the riot of trees. But something deep down, a high tickle in the deepest wrinkles of my soul, told me we would find it. And we did, almost immediately. It resolved out of the darkness, a small brutalist platform rising out of the still damp soil. Had it been so close before? It must have been. Must have. Sammy was recording us with her phone, posting them on Instagram or something. Who knows? My vision had whittled down to a dizzying pinprick, and all I could hear was the hot rush of blood pounding through my ears. I helped her tug open the hatch, vaguely heard myself ask if she really wanted to do this. "Course I do," she said with a tight smile as she pocketed her phone. "It'll be exciting." Then she mounted the ladder and started off down the hatch. That sound only could have been made by the hatch lid slamming shut. We had been climbing down the narrow bore for 5 minutes, each rung burning with a hot metal freeze that nibbled through flesh and seemed to lick at the bone, when there had been a loud, metallic report. Thunk! We both froze on the ladder, Sammy just below me, panting like a tired dog. "What was that?" I whispered, hauling stale air through my aching lungs. "YR," Sammy started in her normal voice, before dropping in an octave. "Why are you whispering? What was that?" I asked again, but I didn't have to ask. I already knew. She did too. I heard the growing scuffle of her climbing back up the ladder. I started too. One white-hot rung after the next, my palms burning, my heart beating its angry fist against my ribs. The climb up was hard. My body seemed to weigh too much. Like each limb was encased in lead as I pulled myself up, nearing what I knew I'd find. And I was right. The hatch was closed. I pounded on it, screamed, knowing that the only ones to hear would be us. I chipped away at it with the army knife to no avail. We tried our phones, first mine then Sammy's, pressing the devices to the lid's rough, rusted skin. No reception. Nothing but the mouth. No one but us, two teenage girls, her with red hair, me with brown, trapped in an awful ladder with nowhere to go but down. I don't like this, Sammy croaked. She sounded so young, like a little girl clutching her teddy bear after an especially dreadful nightmare. I didn't like it either. It was wrong. It was so wrong. It was a pyramid of rocks. The climb down the ladder had been impossible. Time fell away, shifting into a dull blur that didn't much matter. All that mattered was finding your footing as you lowered yourself down, rung after rung, step after step. It might have been an hour or 10, but a while later, a long while, we hit a wide concrete room. It was about the size of your average backyard. The ceiling low, unblemished spare the circular opening through which the ladder ran. Shadows shifted and danced in black relief as we played our headlights across the dark space. On the wall opposite the ladder stood a wide, ruined opening. Nothing but darkness beyond it. The massive bank vault-style door that had once filled it sat in a twisted, broken heap nearby, torn free of its hinges by something that was disturbing. It sent a sudden flood of hot dread filling my guts like boiling water. But what was worse was the pyramid. It stood in the center of the room like a shitty roadside art sculpture, a painstaking pyramid fashioned out of countless rocks. I knew where those stones had come from. Sammy did too. They had been dropped from the above by people like us. Hundreds of them, thousands, sacrificed to the darkness of the earth. The mouth. I knew because topping the pyramid like a Christmas tree star was the rock Sammy had dropped earlier. The exact same one, no doubt about it, tucked carefully atop the mountain of stones. Placed there by someone, something. A high trembling sound like an animal in a snare filled the room as the reality of the situation hit Sammy. She had started to cry. She was losing it, unraveling at the seams. Sitting on the floor, knees to her chest, rocking and sobbing and apologizing for bringing me down here. We had to move. My whole body was one big screaming ache, and if we let exhaustion ease its warm blanket over our shoulders, we'd never get going. I sought air through my lungs and boiled it into authority. We have to go, I said. She sniffled. What? Her voice was nasally. She raised a trembling finger to the cracked entryway across the room. Through there? I nodded, struck one of the matches I still had from the cigarettes. The flame wavered, guttered as a breeze tugged at it. There's a breeze, I said. Airflow. Another way out? She sniffled, shook her head. No way. I say we wait here. Wait for someone to open the hatch. No one knows we're down here, I reminded her. No one. But what if? She started, looking at the pyramid of rocks. She lowered her voice, a hoarse whisper. What if the thing that made that is in there? Where else would it be? I thought, but I didn't say that. She was close to catatonia, and I needed her in motion. We have nowhere else to go, I said. Nowhere. She looked at me, her face pale and ghostly in the light of my headlamp. Her eyes were puffy, red, bright with terror. Then she summoned her courage like one would a lungful of air, and nodded. I hauled her to her feet, and we started off through the doorway. "There's someone following us," Sammy said in a choked whisper. The entryway had fed us into an underground hospital. It was abandoned, left to rot beneath the earth. A maze of scarred linoleum hallways, moldering gurneys with thick leather straps, blown-out doorways with padded rooms beyond. No, not a hospital, an asylum, or a laboratory, a kind of psycho mixture of both. Its construction spoke of a time before technology and the advancement of human rights. Yellowed walls and popcorn ceilings were shredded, torn to ribbons, like a feral something had been set loose. Rusty smears of dried blood textured the white darkness here and there. It was awful. Each footfall, each pull of breath, all sounds seemed to echo, clang, reverberate through the white walls of this underground labyrinth. It was like a nightmarish Escher painting. It was the mouth. Up until then, we had been negotiating slowly, rounding corners, finding more shadow-soaked hallways, passing an overturned reception desk, more padded cells, driven forth by terror and primal survival instinct. Then Sammy had whispered in my ear, her breath hot, her voice hoarse with terror. "There's someone following us." I froze. A cold infection of goosebumps went sprouting up over my body. My lungs were tight, empty of air. My heart was pounding with icy fear. I turned slowly, not wanting to make a sound, afraid that if I did it might make the someone real. She must have imagined it. There was no one. Then I saw the eyes. Two dull, milky pinpricks hovering just outside the light of our headlamps. They were head level, higher than head level, unblinking, hovering and watching. Eyes. Sammy's body was right up against mine. She was wound up like an over-torqued screw. Terror radiated from her in hot waves. I could feel fear beating through her veins. Ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. The eyes moved so suddenly that both of us screamed. They surged forward without any warning, rushed at us, the thing, the something, the awful subdwelling mutate that would devour our hot intestines while we were still shrieking. I saw its crooked, emaciated silhouette lumbering and lurching toward us, a tall, broken thing, its arms stick-like and so impossibly thin. Those glowing blind eyes set into a narrow, malformed head as molded and precise as a canine skull. Then the creature hit our pool of light, and the eyeballs popped out of thin air, like the light had banished that thing, leaving only two marbles which clattered down, hit the floor, bounced, and rolled to our feet. They stared up at us, pale, seeing, and somehow blasphemous. Sammy and I jerked back and bolted like the wind. My cousin screamed and yanked me back, just as solid ground dropped out beneath me. We had been in a blind rush, a blur of hallways scrolling by, passing padded cells with shadows that moved within them, when the floor had suddenly stopped being. Sammy grabbed my shirt and jerked me back just as I went tumbling out over the sudden chasm. After a gut-wrenching second of uncertainty, I found myself on solid ground, looking down at the vast, empty nothingness. There was a 20-foot canyon separating this side from the other, a thin, splintery plank board running across it. It looked like someone had shoveled out a massive, crude pit in the hallway of the underground nightmare. We peered down, hauling air through broken lungs, hearts pounding, not sure what we were seeing. A solid knot of arms and legs, interwoven and laced together, filled out the bottom of the abyss. They were gray, broken, decayed, Torn flesh hung from bone. Massive boils filled with hot pus-textured rotting skin. But this wasn't a shallow grave, and they weren't the departed. As soon as our light hit them, they slithered apart, breaking away like a hive of snakes under the burning heat of a magnifying glass. Dreadful heads, pained and drawn in agony, recoiled from the light, broken, human-like things forcing themselves off in a shadow to reclaim what little salvation they had. They hissed and moaned and chuckled with insane humor, like condemned souls cast from heaven, forever banished to this pit of darkness for an existence of raw pain. "Oh my God," Sammy croaked. "Oh my God." But there was no God in this place. It was a great blasphemy born from the sin of the unrighteous. It was awesome and awful. It was— A low sound came from behind us, tucked into the cacophony of torment. Sammy didn't hear it, too taken with the pit of the damned. I slowly turned, my heart fluttering with icy dread, my stomach knotting in on itself. But the hallway behind us was empty. I blew a relieved sigh. The giant meat spider exploded out of the darkness with a throaty screech, a blur of limbs carrying it across the scuffed ceiling. But they weren't limbs. They were human arms and legs. I gasped as it rattled down the wall, hissing and pulsing with hideous life as it joined the floor and surged forward. It bubbled into the light, a nightmarish set of conjoined twins, two separate androgynous entities melded together, appendages beginning where others ended, scraps of face in all the wrong places. Eyeballs and noses and mouths all scattered about its lumpy, fleshy form. It was a nightmare of terrible industry, and its head, much like a spider's, was bulbous and truly heinous. Patches of hair textured its lumpy scalp above rows of eyeballs and a wide mouth of thick razor teeth. Sammy turned, screamed, and stepped back. It was instinctive, a single misplaced move that sent her out over empty space. She reached out for me, her fingertips skimming my arm as she issued a surprised "oh." Then she was gone, plummeting into the sea of souls, swallowed by the mass of forgotten bodies. I heard her shriek, heard her wail in bright agony as those things tore her limb for limb, picking her apart like a mean kid with a stunned fly. Then I looked up, and a fleshy mass of teeth and eyes and hatred was atop me. The meat spider tore me down into darkness. I awoke in a biblical spiderweb to the reek of death. It was a dark, sticky place, hot with the stench of dead things. The smell flooded my lungs, burned my nose and eyes. I looked around, my eyes adjusting to the gloomy haze. I'd lost my headlamp. Fibrous white nets resolved out of the darkness, stretching to and fro like an entropic masterpiece, all of it seemingly random and oddly beautiful in its precision. An incredible tapestry of psycho nature. Massive cocooned lumps textured the space, scattered throughout the nest like sleeping beauties. They were prey, and so was I. I couldn't move. I was melted to a wall of webbing by a spray of fiber, not entirely cocooned, but imprisoned in a straitjacket of dreadful string. I tried to scream, but my mouth was gagged with a shred of webbing. I issued a low, muffled shriek, the sound of despair. Then the entire formation began to tremble with a low vibration. I heard a tight hiss, saw a dark shape skitter by. The meat spider mounted the nearest cocoon and tore into it with its terrible human-like arms, craning its lumpy head to suck meat from bone. I heard congested slurping, things tearing, flesh and bones snapping apart. It was feeding, and it would come for me next. I slowly began to struggle, trying to work some slack into my binds. but they held firm. Held firm. I felt something firm in my back pocket. I patted it desperately. The Swiss Army knife. I worked it out, popped the blade as the noise of feeding slowed, as the awful meat spider shredded its fill from one of its victims. I eased the rusty blade through the webbing and began to saw. It was like cutting through canvas. The web behind me instantly began to slacken, splitting apart, losing its tension as, oh God, oh no. The meat spider lunged, drenched in still hot blood, moving with that deliberate speed afforded only to creepy crawlies. It was coming for me, arms and legs pumping, its misshapen form throbbing with terrible heat. I worked the Swiss Army knife harder, faster, hacking away blindly, hatcheting apart the web holding me captive. And I could smell it, oh God, the reek of ancient rot, of things dead and decayed and hate, and it was here. Oh God, it was here. The meat spider lunged. For a terrifying instant all I saw were eyes and teeth. There was a horrible intelligence in those eyes, an awful cunning that reminded me so much of the dead-eyed stare of serial killers in court. Then the web split beneath me, and I fell. A second later, and I would have been girl meat. Instead, I was tumbling down, plummeting like a stone, the ground black and solid, and rushing toward me. It slammed into me like a freight train, and I crumpled like a bird. It wasn't solid ground. It was an angry rush of water. A river tumbled and heaved through a rocky canyon. The rapids frothed like a rabid dog, whipping me around like a rag doll in the hands of a brat. I snapped this way and that, barking my arms and legs and brain off lips of rock that seemed to bite out at me. Water that reeked of rotten gasoline and the thousands of dead things that had washed away flooded my mouth, filled my lungs. I choked and fought and tumbled downstream until blackness expanded. I awoke in a drain pipe to the first light of dawn. It painted strange shapes on the curved concrete bore in which I was delivered. I folded over and vomited a warm spray of water. A thin trickle ran from the darkness of the pipe, issuing through my hands, hair, flushing me with sobriety. That darkness repulsed me, made my skin ache and crawl with nausea. I staggered toward the light, fought my way out into a rocky shore. Seagulls were honking angrily, fighting over a scrap of meat on the beach. Other seabirds twisted through the foggy air above gray waters. The ocean heaved at my feet. I looked up at the sky and cried. A trucker found me limping along the highway like an abused dog. I didn't struggle when he dragged me to the car. I collapsed limply into his arms and let myself be taken. He rushed me to the nearest hospital. I found out I was 80 miles from Grandma's. I'm in a sterile white place now, a hospital that reminds me so much of that underground nightmare of things that should never see the light of day. I started this account hoping it would bring me peace, hoping it would help me come to terms with the trauma I'd faced. It hasn't helped at all. The police are still looking for the hatch and for Sammy's body. It's been 2 days, and they've found neither. I was hoping normality would return, would burn away the nightmares that have haunted me since I've been back. But it hasn't. When I shut my eyes, I see things I'd seen out of the corner of my eyes in those padded rooms. Unspeakable horrors that belong not in this world, but in a place far beyond it. God save them. It's an empty planet. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm. But it's all I can offer. God save them.